Hey everybody, Nick here from the Gear Confessions. So last week I uploaded a new video giving my thoughts, a quick pros and cons list on POD Go. If you haven't watched that, go check it out of course. But during the course of that I mentioned how people who are familiar with Helix and Helix Stomp even might experience some frustration with POD Go. Because I think I called the workflow with that more streamlined and straightforward. By that I meant quite literally it's more linear by nature. But I had a question come in from my friend Jonathan out in Portland asking what I meant by that, and if I could give a quick rundown on how the workflow is different between all those different units. So if you're someone who's familiar with Helix and you want to know what life would be like with a POD Go or vice versa, or if you don't have any experience with Line 6 units at all, hopefully this video will help give you kind of a deeper dive into what's possible from a routing standpoint with each one of the units. So take a look. All right, so let's dig into POD Go here. I thought the best way to help you understand what I mean by the straightforward and linear approach that you have to take in setting up new presets would actually just be to show you what a new preset looks like. So we'll hit view here and dive into that. So on each preset with POD Go, you're sort of locked into certain preset blocks. By that I mean every preset will have a volume and a wah. Of course you can change what model that is and all the different settings related to that, but those are preset. Now, if you're someone who happens to like a volume pedal, perhaps after amp, so you can control overall volume, you just hit the action key and slide this over to wherever you want it in the chain. So that's quite nice, of course. Additionally, you have an effects loop insert. So if you have, let's say, a distortion or a fuzz that you like, you can keep that in front of your amp, or if you have something that you may traditionally want after an amp and cab, like like a delay or a reverb, you can just as easily slide that back here, even a loop or something, right? You can put that there, which is great. Okay, so I mentioned amp and cab. You also get one of those. You can have an amp or a preamp, which is great. And then you can have a cab block, which is just a single cab block. You can have dual cabs with POD Go, at least at this point, or an impulse response. So those are your options there. Sliding over one block, you also have an EQ. Again, like the Y, you can select which kind of EQ you want and make all your changes that you need to, but that is locked in. You can, of course, just like everything else, move this around, but what you see is what you get there. Now, as it relates to these four black boxes here, this is where you can slot in different things that you're interested in, right? So let's say we want to add a boost, right? We'll have the kinky boost there. So keep it in front of the amp. We're going to drive saturation. You drop it in after, you're going to increase your overall level. So there's that. So with these blocks, I mean, everything is movable. Technically, you could, throw your amp first thing in the in the chain, but it is all straight line. You don't get different routing options or parallel paths or anything like that. So there are some limitations. But yeah, for some people, that's going to be what you want. You want something straightforward and simple, and really that's what POD Go is going to give you. All right, so now we're looking at Helix Stomp, and in some ways, Helix Stomp is a little bit more similar to POD Go than the Helix would be. By that I mean it has a single processing chip in it, and so you really do have more of a one-path approach. However, in that path, you have more flexibility in your routing options. So we're taking a look here at this preset by Alex Strabala. So we're coming in on the input block to a compressor, and then we have two different amps that we're running. So you're able to have more complex tones. Or if you wanted to, in this next preset, this is also using two amps, but you could just as easily have a single amp and then run into a pair of different impulse responses. Or let's say you wanted to have two different reverbs or delays or drives or whatever it might be. There's a little bit more flexibility. And I think that the difference between Helix Stomp and POD Go will become a little bit more overt as Helix Stomp goes to 8 blocks. Currently, you only get 6, but with an 8-block Helix Stomp, I think that the difference between those two units will be a little bit more clear, especially as you consider what you're able to do with those with the different routing options. All right, and finally here we'll take a look at Helix Floor. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is the roadmap to what is probably my most involved preset. It's the one I've spent the most time tweaking. And I mean, as you can see, I've got 2 different amps, an IR block, multiple distortions, multiple reverbs. I'm actually using a preamp as an overdrive. There's a lot going on here, and that's really what Helix allows you to do. I showed you the sort of empty preset on POD Go, so we'll just scroll to a new preset here. This is what you get, right? It's wide open. You have 2 parallel paths here that represent your different processing chips. But if you wanted to, you could easily turn this into 4 different paths, right? And run an entire band into it. I'm talking, 2 guitars, vocals, and a bass, or a keyboard, or whatever it might be. That's actually viable within this unit just because you have so much power. So if you're someone who's really into tweaking, really into, control. I think that's what it is. Maybe the Helix is more for control freaks than something like POD Go or HX Stomp would be, because you can literally assign your foot switches to toggle tons of different parameters, label those foot switches so you know what they're doing. You can manipulate your different paths and your outputs. It's really phenomenal and very deep. And so if you're someone who has a background in modeling and that doesn't scare you, then yeah, Helix is the way to go. But if you're someone who's newer to modeling or looking for a more, again, like I said in my original video, something that's more streamlined, something that's a little bit more linear by nature, then definitely go check out the POD Go, or perhaps HX Stomp, because those are definitely going to be more in your wheelhouse. Okay, and that's that. Hopefully now you have a better idea of what the workflow differences are like between Helix, HX Stomp, and POD Go. If you have any questions, let me know. But as always, thanks for watching, and go check out my blog, gearconfessions.com. Thanks a lot.